if you don't feel it.
Thank you, darling.
That's your recording night, Councillor Island.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Leona. Afternoon. Welcome to this meeting of the Planning Applications Committee. I'm Councillor Annette Ireland. I'm chair to the committee. I'd like to welcome our elected members that make up the committee today. We have Councillor Cunningham, Provost Fletcher, Councillor Miller and Councillor Swift today. I don't think I've missed anybody out. We have also Sharon McIntyre, who is the clerk to the planning committee, and attending also from planning we have John Dugan, Graham Shanklin and Alan Pepler are here today. Now I also believe that we have Stephen Reid from the HSCP is attending the committee today, and Drew Sandilands, who is the local democracy reporter today. Sharon, do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, we do, from Councillors McLean and Convery.
Thank you very much. Do we have any declarations of interest in anything that's before us today? Okay, thank you very much. Can I move us on then to the first item, which is the Director of Environment's report in relation to the receipt of the new planning appeals and the planning decisions that have came before us. Can I open it out? First of all, Mr. Shankland, are you wishing to comment on anything that's came in on that?
No, nothing to add to the report, Chair.
Okay, can I open that out to the committee at the moment?
Right.
Councillor Miller.
Thank you, thank you, Chair. I would draw your attention to bottom of page 3 and start at page 4 about the change of use for the outdoor preschool and after school site adjacent to Williamwood School car park. In January or February of this year, we as a planning committee discussed that, and we discussed it extensively. There were a lot of things said about it, and mainly we rejected on the roads because Newford Grove was built for the 40 or 50 houses that's down there, and yet we have got Cartmill Nursery down there that was built 3 years ago. We've got Williamwood School, one of the biggest schools in the area, built to the side of it in 2006. That road cannot take extra traffic. One of the reasons why we rejected it. The other main reason was because of the parking. Now, we as a local planning committee, we know the area. I know the area especially well, simply because I've lived there for a good number of years. I'm not saying how many, but that place, we rejected that for good and valid reasons. Now, the appeal goes to DPEA in Edinburgh, who then appoint a reporter in Falkirk, and the reporter comes out, and I'm pretty sure, I think it's the 21st of May, he came out. Now, if he came out at 10 o'clock, all the Cartmill folk would be in, the nursery folk would be in, all the school folk would be in. It's a nice quiet road. He doesn't know. And then this is what they call local democracy, that he overturned our decision. Now, as this planning committee will know, we tried to meet with the head of the reporters 5-6 years ago, and we couldn't manage it. But we did. The planning department did get a meeting with. Can't remember the guy's name, but he was very good. And I thought that things had taken a turn for the better. But here we are again, complaining about something that the reporter has done because he has paid one visit for half an hour. So where does local democracy come in here? It's just a horrendous decision.
No, thank you very much, Councillor Miller. Councillor Cunningham, you wishing to come in?
No.
Yeah,
I
no,
I thought it was right enough. You know, we did go through it thoroughly, and that was the decision. But I think again the reporter, the Falkirk, I don't know, there was in their eyes test it. You fed up with them.
Thank you. No, I'm in absolute agreement. I still have really serious concerns regarding the parking for this application. I note, you know, that our roads department didn't submit an objection, but they did raise concerns, and we spoke about this previously at the meeting when we rejected this application. Roads had actually previously said that they would refuse this as there was a lack of parking. Now, I know this was before they put on there a couple of the additional parking spaces, but they were really worried that it would lead to, and in their words, indiscriminate parking on Newford Grove, which would have posed a risk to road safety. And they also previously stated that they were really worried about the lack of a safe footway and a very real concern regarding parking in Newford Grove, and they said it hadn't been addressed. Again, I understand the applicant had put in a couple more parking spaces, but I still have really serious concerns. The reporter, and this is absolutely Councillor Miller, the reporter stated at the time that they visited, they said, at the time of my inspection, there was no on-street parking in the immediate vicinity, though I accept this may be different at busier times. But we know that's the case. We know that what effect parking can have here, and that was why I felt so strongly when we refused this. Now, the applicant has stated that the proposed additional provisional parking spaces that they have increased would be more than adequate for the services requirements. As the facilities actually said this, I'm going to expect to see no cars parking on Newford Grove, if that's the case. And I'm hoping that they will remind parents of this accordingly when it does open. I would be liking to I want to make roads aware of this, of any possible parking issues, because I know I've asked for it, and I know that Councillor Miller's asked for it, for there to be double yellow lines along this section. So I am in complete agreement with what Councillor Miller and Councillor Cunningham have said there. Councillor Provost, you wishing to come in?
No, not specifically in that one. I mean, I don't know that it's overly helpful just to rerun the debate in it, but I really wanted to ask about the other appeals received. Really, I'm just slightly puzzled. I just want to be clear in the process. I mean, there's one for a high hedge and somebody's appealed. So where does that appeal go? The second one is this extension at 4 Wigton Avenue, which the person who didn't get their planning has appealed, which is fine. I would have thought that would have gone to the reporter as well, but it appears to be something at 4 Wigton Avenue on the agenda today. I was just thrown to that.
My understanding is it's the original, the application from May, they've sent it up to the reporter, but they've submitted a new application before us today. Mr. Shanklin, are you wishing to come in on that point?
Yes, I mean, coming in on the second one there at Wigton Avenue, yes, that's the application that came before you in May that was refused permission, and the applicant has appealed that to the DPA, as you say, and that will take its own course. They have in the meantime submitted a revised application addressing some of the points that the committee were concerned about, and that will be coming up later in the agenda. So we could leave discussion on that until later. But yes, this is the one, that the application from May that has now been appealed. With regards
That's helpful to know, because I just was thoroughly puzzled by that. And, you know, I won't discuss the application until it comes up, obviously. But I just want to make sure, is it appropriate then if somebody can appeal it, and, you know, the perfect right to do that, but also they address the issues that caused it to fail, and there's another application. I mean, what happens if this is passed and the appeal is upheld by the reporter? So they've got planning permission for 2 different developments almost. It just seems to be odd that we've got 2 potential things in the go here, which might get planning permission. You know, which could
yeah, I mean, yes, you're right. An applicant can put in 2 applications, or however many applications they want. If both end up at the end of the day being granted, then they have the choice of which one to implement. But they can put in more than 1 application for more than 1 proposal, and the one that's coming up later is addressing the concerns that you had with the original proposal, and we'll come to that later. But they're perfectly within their rights to go to appeal on that application that was refused. And if they end up with 2 consents, they can decide which one to implement.
Okay, that's quite clear. I'm relatively new to planning. I didn't know that. I didn't realise people could have multiple
Yes.
applications on, but that's quite clear. I understand now. Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
With regards to the first one, the high hedge notice, that has gone to the DPEA as well. The high hedge notice is a slightly unusual situation in that the applicant the applicant puts in the application to have the hedge removed or reduced in height. The council agreed to that application and issued a notice on the hedge owner to reduce the height of the hedge. The hedge owner, because they've got a decision against their wishes, has a right of appeal. So that goes to the DPEA, to a reporter as well, who'll visit the site, who'll speak to or who'll get information both from the applicant who wanted the hedge removed or reduced, and the hedge owner who wanted it retained at its original height, and the reporter will make a decision one way or the other on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shanklin. I mean, the prophecy is entirely correct. We're not here to go over the debate again about the pre and after school nursery, but I would like some reassurance that we make sure that all those conditions that were attached to this planning application are met and adhered to, and that we do keep a close eye on it with regard to parking, because I know it is only a temporary allocation. So, you know, I'm taking it that people will be keeping a close eye on that to ensure that this isn't causing any further issues.
Yes, it will be for the planning service to keep an eye on that and to make sure that the conditions are adhered to.
No, thank you. Councillor Miller?
Thanks, Chair. I was just going to reiterate more or less what you said there. Also ask Graham, Alan, John, is there any way that we can communicate our displeasure to the reporter and ask? I mean, to me, it's the whole system does not lend itself to local democracy. If you're going to have a single reporter, why do they not consult with members of the committee? Because if there's a consultation with folk that know and they came to obviously they came to the same conclusion, well, fair enough. You can live with that. But the way it is done, that we've got 5 this time, 6 or 7 folk in the planning committee that knows the area, and then it comes down to one single guy who lives in Falkirk. Well, he might not live in Falkirk, but from his office is in Falkirk, and who doesn't know the area. And as you said, that he has turned around and says, well, it might be different at a different time of day. We can guarantee it's different at a different time of day. But so is there any way, Graham, that we can actually communicate our displeasure to the reporter's office at DPEA?
I mean, there's nothing to stop you writing, expressing your displeasure, but essentially that is a planning system that we have in Scotland, that decisions that are made by committees across the council, if the applicant is unhappy with the decision, they have a right of appeal. The appeal from committee goes to the DPEA. As you know, if it's a delegated decision, the review goes to the local review body, which is members, and no further. But if it's a committee decision, that goes to the DPA, and it's a reporter that's appointed to make that decision. The council's decision and reasons for it were explained and were put in the paperwork to the reporter, so he did have that information before him. But you know, if you want to instruct the committee clerk to write with your displeasure, then of course you're entitled to do that. But I don't think it's going to make a difference either to this decision or generally to the way the planning system works, to be honest with you.
Okay, thanks, Graham.
Thank you very much, Councillor Miller. I do find myself in agreement with you on that one. Thank you
And I
very
say
much.
that it's political. If you're going to write to anybody, you need to write to the local MSP or to the minister responsible for planning. They're the only people that can change it.
No, thank you very much, Provost. Are there any other comments on the appeals before us?
No.
Okay, no, thank you very much. Can I move us on to the planning applications then? First one before us is 2020 02, I think that's 67, land at Drumby Crescent, and it is erection of 68 bedroom care home, including spa facilities, cafe, cocktail bar and cinema room, and 23 assisted living apartments with associated car parking and landscaping, including community garden. Can I pass over to, now, is it yourself, Mr. Shankland, who's going to speak to this one? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll just introduce it briefly. You've had all the papers out before you since last week, so you'll have had the chance to have a read of it. But just sort of in summary, this is the ground located between the Eastwood Health Centre and the railway line, the former playing fields of the old William Wood School. The proposals for the erection of a 68-bedroom care home and associated facilities in one block, and a 23-bed 33 apartment block assisted living to the north of the site. Now, you'll see from the report that the application's recommended for refusal, firstly in terms of the care home use, and secondly in terms of design aspects. And I'll just touch on those briefly just to summarise it for you. You will note that the site is allocated in the local development plan for residential use, for mainstream sort of residential use. So in terms of the principle of the care home use, one of our consultees is the Health and Social Care Partnership, the HSCP, and in their consultation response have stated that they don't support the proposal, and in particular the care home element of it. The consultation response is discussed more fully on pages 16 and 17 of your papers. Essentially, they've indicated that there's an oversupply of care home facilities in the East Renfrewshire market, and as of March 2021, there was a vacancy of approximately 23% of the beds within the area, and they state that the oversupply in the market and the high vacancy rates means that existing care homes are vulnerable to oversupply and could become unsustainable and may close. They've drawn our attention to their strategic plan and commissioning plan, which supports a move away from current reliance on care home placements and a move to focus on a range of services to people within their own homes. They've also raised concerns about increased cost pressures resulting from the development and in-migration of residents, which will also result in additional pressures on existing health and care infrastructure. Now, the applicant, of course, has submitted information disputing HSCP's conclusions and their comments and proven need. Of course, they believe that there is a need and a demand for these facilities and think that the HSCP comments are flawed and disregard the economic benefits to the residents of East Renfrewshire. And the applicant also questions HSCP's role as a consultee and the remit to intervene in the market. However, on balance, in preparing the report, we've considered the proposal to be contrary to the local development plan policies, strategic policies 1 and 2, which requires us to take into account the impact on existing and planned infrastructure, and also looked at policy SG3 of the proposed local plan 2, which does permit specialist and supported accommodation, but where there is a proven need, which can be evidenced by an appropriate business plan or statement and supported by HSCP. And on balance, we don't believe that that has been demonstrated here with this proposal. The other aspect to the development is the design aspects. The site is elevated above the ground level at the HSCP car park in Drumbay Crescent, and it's believed, it's thought that the layout, the size and the massing of the building, with the site that sits sort of 3 to 4 metres higher than the car park, and the flats, which themselves go up to 3 stories high, over 10 metres high, is considered that the overall proposal would be visually intrusive in the area. And the last aspect, just to bring to your attention, concerns noise from the railway line. It's obviously located at a junction, a crossover of 2 railway lines. And the report on page 11 actually says that there's an objection from environmental health on the grounds of noise. Now, we do have an update to that. What environmental health have said since the report was prepared was that is that if the applicants can put in an acoustic barrier, an acoustic fence, then the development would meet the noise standards. But without the acoustic barrier, without the acoustic fence, it wouldn't meet the acceptable noise impact standards. Now, the acoustic fence that's proposed by the applicants would be up to about 4.4 metres high in places. Now, that's about 14 feet, which takes it roughly to eye level with for someone standing in the first floor balcony. And position-wise, at the back of the nursing home, for instance, it would only be about 2.5 metres away from the building. So that would be 4 metres high, only 2 metres away from the building. And it's considered that a fence of that scale and size would be very visually intrusive in the area and would be unacceptable on design grounds. So as I said at the beginning, it's recommended that the application is refused for the reasons contained in the report. Thank you, Chair. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shanklin. It's just for the committee to note that we also have Stephen Reid here from the HSCP, so if there's any questions direct for Stephen as well. Can I open it out to the committee? Councillor Cunningham, are you wishing to come in?
Yeah, I would like to ask a question. In what capacity did you say the CHCP were being consulted? Is it as a statutory body or what?
They are consulted. They are a part of the council, and the policy.
Is it a statutory body or not?
The council itself is a statutory body, and the policy does require the consultation. The policy does require consultation with HSCP because it talks about support from HSCP, requiring support from HSCP. Sorry, carry on.
Carry on. It's the first time in all the years that I have sat in the committee and there have been things through for the CHCP. It should have been there for and weren't, and now they are. So it makes me wonder, is it coming under a statutory body or what? That was all. Right? So you're saying it's not a statutory body, and it is a statutory body, what?
Well, the policy of the council does require us to consult with HSCP. Right. The policy said that there is the policy SG3 of the Local Development Plan 2 says that proposals for specialist residential accommodation will be permitted where the following criteria are met, and that includes there's a proven need for such specialist accommodation which can be evidenced by an appropriate business plan or statement and supported by the HSCP. So we're required to consult with them in accordance with that policy.
Right, okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shankland. I missed which order the committee members had raised their hands, so I'll just go in the order I've got it on the screen. Councillor Miller.
Oh, thank you. It's not often I go before the August bodies, Councillor Swift and Councillor Fletcher, but there we go. If we go to the reasons for refusal on page 22, to start off with, the proposals contrary to strategic policies of the 1 and 2 East Region Local Development Plan not been satisfactorily demonstrated the proposal will not have an adverse impact on existing community facilities, infrastructure and services. I would suggest that Drumby Crescent doesn't have community facilities other than the health and care centre, infrastructure or services. It doesn't have a cinema. It doesn't have a lot of things that the care home is promising. Secondly, the proposal is currently D1 local development plan because it's a residential area. Well, I would suggest that, well, sorry, it says because of the detriment of amenity of future residents. If this is built, there ain't going to be any future residents here because that's taking all the land away. So there's no, between the two railways, there is absolutely no room for any further land. The third reason is what the HSEP has said, and I'll leave that to others to comment on. But I heard what Graham was saying that they're trying to get away from care. Trying to get away from care homes and into care at home. Yesterday and the day before, we have had two, and Annette can back me up in this one, we've had folk complaining because folk are bed blocking in the hospitals because we can't get care at home in East Hampshire. All councillors were given or sent an email from Julie Murray on Friday to see how much the HSEP is under pressure for care at home. They just cannot provide the care at home. So how can we transfer away from care in a care home, nursing home, and into care at home? The one thing I did notice about this, there was one neighbour has commented, and it wasn't even an objection, it was only a representation. And reading the papers, the other thing that I noticed was that the HSEP are worried about inward migration. The one thing I would suggest about inward migration into this care home is if we don't have enough care beds in our neck of the woods, we send a lot of our residents into Glasgow. Now, I know of 3 people who died with COVID in Three Bridges Care Home. I know of 2 people from Eaglesome, then Roseburn in East Kilbride. So we're getting maybe inward migration, but we're also getting outward migration as well. So I would suggest that maybe balances things up. But as I say, I'll let others that know more than me about the HSCP.
Thank you very much. Councillor Swift, I have you next on the list.
Thank you very much, Chair. I guess the key thing here is the primary objection is the HSCP objection. And then without that, this would meet all the planning criteria, really. So I guess taking a step back, our society is ageing. And yet the HSCP has indicated, and that'll be from audit data and robust data, that approximately 23% of the beds within the area are lying vacant. And it's no nice way to say this, but tragically, we had a lot of care home deaths, and we can't simply brush over that. The short-run legacy of COVID-19 is basically that a lot of the residents in care homes died. And frankly, if I was an older resident or any of my family who was an appropriate, well, I am an older resident, let's be honest. But if it was me or my family, I wouldn't be keen, you know, at the height of the pandemic to encourage people to go into a care home. But so what we have is a short. We have an oversupply of beds just now. But I don't know if anybody can cast their mind back to when the care home in Newton Mearns, just about the beginning of the pandemic, I think that was, when the care home in Newton Mearns, well, it wasn't providing care of a quality that was deemed to be appropriate. When residents were being moved out, and you know, I would commend the officers of the council who worked day and night to get these people rehomed. They couldn't all get to homes in East Renfrewshire because there weren't any beds. So if we take a kind of, again, it's a step back and looking at the market for care home beds, sure, there will be a short run oversupply, but but that's likely to be short run. We're not getting any younger as a society, and Scotland is the oldest part in terms of the age of our population. We are the oldest part of the UK, and East Renfrewshire has an over propensity within Scotland for very old people. We know all this, we hear about it regularly. So I would think it would be not unreasonable to say the oversupply of beds is likely short run in terms of care home beds, and residents, I think our residents should be entitled to at least the potential for an availability of a local bed.
Yeah.
I also think that, I mean, if you look at the kind of key things that the IJB or HSCP, whatever set of 3-letter, 4-letter acronym you want to use to describe it, their desire to keep people at home is a very sensible objective to have. You need to have the capacity to be able to do it, but also it's not always suitable, unfortunately. It's just not suitable. And what they're potentially offering in this application is supported accommodation, supported living accommodation. And I know that we as a council, because we've got about 246 beds that we've put together for local residents. And I know, because I got a complaint from somebody recently who couldn't get into one, we don't have enough of supported living accommodation. So right now we have a genuine shortage in supported living accommodation. We are likely to have an interim shortfall, or not interim, a short run shortfall or oversupply of beds, but I don't see that persisting. I mean, one of the key things that we can say all across the UK is that we have a successful vaccination programme, and that has broken the link between deaths and COVID. And things look good. The numbers are beginning to fall. There will be a time, and it will not be far away, when people will again think that care homes are an appropriate place to go. And that then will be reflected in the numbers. Ultimately, it's their money, frankly, and if they want to invest their money in something that they think it will work, well, I think that's okay. But I think the other thing, there's just kind of 3 elements to this application. There's the care home beds, there's the supported living, and there's also the dementia support unit as well. And I think specialist dementia care is something. Now, I know that the HSCP say that people are, there are dementia patients in beds, embedded within care homes, but we don't have specialist dementia care, and that's something that I think we should be looking to try and develop. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, as to the merits of the application, it's providing stuff. It's providing supported living, dementia care, and I genuinely think that the care home beds oversupply is a very short-run issue for us. And I think it's a good application. I think I would support the application with the proviso that there's the buffer zone in the garden area and an acoustic fence. I have to say, I think it's a good application, and I think it meets our needs as residents. And I think to say as a strategy to minimise people coming from outside our area by actually constraining beds for our residents, I think that's nothing short of repulsive, frankly. I think it's wrong. We'll move on.
Thank you very much, Councillor Swift. Councillor Fletcher, can I begin, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a number of points in this that concern me. I mean, the first one was, the comments from an environmental health and noise. I mean, I get a bit annoyed at that, because all of us wanted the new facility at Drumby Crescent, and most of us did anyway. And part of the deal was that the rest of the land would be sold off for a capital receipt. Now, we marketed it and we got a capital receipt. We didn't take the most generous offer, as I recall. I think it was only the 3rd best. I think there was some discussion at full council why we didn't take the best offer. But nevertheless, the applicants, I think it may have changed hands since then, but they've struggled, given what they paid for the land, to get something that works in here. So I think we have a moral thing, firstly, as a council. I mean, it's in the local development plan. It's an area of land that we have sold for a capital receipt on the basis that it will be developed. And I think the thing we should only be looking at is the type of development there. It seems to me it's suitable for whether it's large houses, flats, or whether it's a care home or whatever. We should be looking at the planning aspects of what type of development. And I just don't think the comments on noise, really noise buffering stand up, because the railway line was there when we sold the land. We didn't market it saying we weren't going to give you planning permission because there's a noisy railway line. And there's hundreds of houses in East Renfrewshire built beside railway lines. We've got care homes built beside the motorway in Stewarton Road, and the motorway, the M77, in my view, is worse than the train lines because it goes on 24/7. You've got noise from these. So I just got a bit irritated at the comment there about the proximity to the train line. And I absolutely agree with Councillor Swift that the only major objection, if you like, is from the HSCP. Otherwise, I think we would be granting this. So I looked at the comments of the HSCP quite carefully, and I do think, and probably my question is to Stephen, but the comments I think are confusing, and to be quite honest, I think the objection's quite weak. I mean, on the one hand, we're saying we've got 23% vacancies at the moment, and if we allow this to go ahead, potentially we threaten the existing care homes, because presumably some of the elderly people or the families that place them there would look at this development, say it's better, presumably, and arrange, or cheaper, I don't know whether it's better or cheaper or whatever, but would arrange for more people to move into it, which would weaken the existing facilities, which would cause them to close. I just think that's a wee bit immoral. I mean, are we really saying to elderly people, if there's a better or more suitable, potentially more suitable facility, we're not going to let you move there, we're going to keep you in the one that maybe isn't as suitable as you would like, just to keep it open? I think we should be giving elderly people and their families, the choice of the best possible care for elderly people. And if this is a good facility, why should we be arguing against it? But the HSCP is also saying that it's attracting inward migration. So it can be both. We're either concerned about people moving from East Renfrewshire and weakening the care homes, or we're worried about people moving in from Glasgow or elsewhere. It seems to be it's one or the other. So if they're all coming in for Glasgow, it doesn't really affect the care homes in East Renfrewshire, if you follow my line of logic. We're getting into whether, who knows best here. Now, I'm one of these naive people. I would have thought the developer would have made more money by putting houses or flats in there. So I'm quite surprised to see somebody suggesting that, a care home is better. But what do I know? I don't pretend to be an expert in this. So we're faced with, what's in front of us, which is a care home. But what I can't imagine is any professional developer would be putting millions of pounds into a facility that they thought would be a white elephant. The market's booming in East Renfrewshire for houses. I mean, anybody that looks at, what they're going for at the moment. My daughter's just bought a house in this area, so I know how much you need to pay over the home report to actually secure a house in East Renfrewshire at the moment. The market is booming. So if you're not going down the road of putting housing in there, you would need to be fairly confident, would you know it, that a care home was going to be very successful. I mean, why would you spend tens of millions on a white elephant? And, we're almost saying to the developer, we don't think there's a need for it, so we're not going to give you planning permission. And the developer is saying, I'll spend, millions of pounds building this because there is a demand. I just kind of think you're more likely to believe a developer, because nobody in their right mind is going to spend millions of pounds on a white elephant, are they? If it was lying empty and likely to close. So I just feel the comments from the HSCP to me seem very weak. So I'd like maybe Stephen, I think we should obviously listen to what the HSCP say. We need to be careful not to put them under any more pressure. But I don't think the objections as I set out are very coherent. So, my gut feeling was I didn't have too many problems with this application. But, I do have a concern if the HSCP are unhappy. So I'd like to maybe just look at that.
Thank you very much, Provost.
You.
Stephen, would you like to come in on the points made by the Provost, but are you also wishing to come in on any of the other points that you've heard so far in the discussion?
Absolutely, I'll try my best. There may be some things that I'm not entirely close enough to myself, but really, just in terms of the points, the HSCP absolutely understands that there's a suite of needs across the population, and we are not, the objective is not to shift, as it was stated, away from care homes to care at home, but the policy focus for us and across the country is to increase the opportunities for people to live as long as possible independently and happily at home. But the time, fully recognising the time will come when people may need residential care, and that we need to make sure that we have the appropriate provision there across that full range of needs, including, care at home, supported living, supported accommodation, and full residential care. So that, that's obviously a right for people, and movement and free choice in terms of what people and families want is something we support as well. The other point, just the point about in-migration, that we're trying to make is not one we're objecting to in-migration to East Renfrewshire. That's something that's naturally happening. But what we recognise is that there is a cost involved to the HSCP and to local services from care home development. And that includes, well, particularly the additionality in terms of costs is for new members, new people coming into the population. And there's a direct cost in terms of the provision of free personal and nursing care to the HSCP. And we also are confident that, in the short term and in the longer term, there's increased demand pressure on local community-based services, GPs, community nursing, physio, all of these services that will be called upon, and a knock-on resource impact. So that was the point about in-migration, and that was really the only point about in-migration. That creates that additionality in terms of potential costs. Sorry, I'm trying to think. Was there any other points that I didn't answer? So, really, our objection is that there is a cost to the, there is a consequence to the HSCP of care home development, and what we were looking for is, that the application would have demonstrated that level of need that we would have certainly considered, but we did not see that in the application. It didn't relate to our catchment area, and it spoke of a very small, they illustrated a very small increase in demand by, I think it was 2034, but not earlier. And that, there are a lot of variables in terms of the monitoring of our care home market that's really led by our commissioning team. But we monitor our, there's qualitative and quantitative monitoring of our care home market. We work closely with existing providers to make sure that the provision is what people need. And at the moment, the people we work with, we're confident that residents in East Renfrewshire are currently appropriately placed. As well as that, there's a care inspectorate working nationally that inspects our care home provision, and they're there to flag up any concerns in what is there for people in East Renfrewshire, and recommend any areas for improvement, and flag up any concerns going forward for future provision. So that's really the way the care home estate is managed. So we were not happy with the application that it took us away from that or raised any issues that we weren't aware of in terms of clear demand in the future. And it's really that balance between saying, well, there's an impact for local community-based provision and being confident that that need is demonstrated. Because as I said, as part of that suite, we'll be happy if we're confident that that need is there, then we would support, but we felt we couldn't support.
Thank you very much. Councillor Miller, you wishing to come back in?
Thank you, Chair. I, as Chair of the Audit and Scrutiny Committee, spoke to the Chair and Financial Officer of the HSCP back in March or something like that, and I can see exactly where Stephen's coming from, that there is, and we have to admit, there is a cost, doesn't matter whether it's inward migration or not, or even our own residents going into as they get older. But unfortunately, well, I'm not saying unfortunately because everybody gets older and that's always better. It's always better getting older, and the alternative's not anything, is a lot worse. But can I say that, yeah, as we do get older, the costs are obviously getting greater. And that, okay, we get that email from Julie Murray on Friday, I think it was, and that more or less reinforced what Stephen is saying. So we're no any better off now than we were in the month of March. So I can understand exactly where Stephen's coming from.
No, thank you very much. Stephen, I wanted to ask you a quick question because it's been touched on a couple of times about the care at home, and we've all had emails from residents and from the HSCP. Is that something that you anticipate being a long-term issue, or is that something that there's a short-term issue? It's just if only if you can answer that for us.
Well, I get maybe a bit of a perception, but you know, obviously care at home is a highly stretched service, as many of the HSCP services are, you know, and social care is across the country. But I would say that is a short-term issue that's really, you know, a lag in terms of the impacts of the pandemic. You know, it did feel, that email did feel a bit like, you know, where we were at the early stages of the pandemic, but it's really to do with a lot of absence at the moment. People are tired and are requiring holiday. There's a lot of annual leave at the moment, obviously at this time of year, but people are requiring to take it because of the demands they've been under over the past 16, 18 months. So I would say it's a short-term problem. Just a couple of points. Just Councillor Swift raised the issue about the vacancy rate, and what we've really seen in terms of the vacancy rate is that in the months, and certainly the year preceding the COVID pandemic, our vacancy rate was around about 20%. And at the height of the pandemic to January of this year, it rose to 33%. So a third of beds vacant was really the impact of the pandemic. And that's returned now to roughly 20% as of this week. So I kind of feel like, you know, our figures are showing that we're where we began before the pandemic. So I don't think it's entirely clear that, you know, what we're talking about is the impact of COVID in terms of vacancy rates.
Thank you very much. Mr. Shankland, you're wishing to... Oh, sorry, Councillor Cunningham, you wishing to come in?
Aye. Well, in that case, how is there so many people bed blocking in the hospitals?
Well, I think that was the issue about the care at home. That care at home has a period of...
into nursing home.
Right, okay. I guess I wouldn't comment on, you know, individual circumstances of cases. We do have, you know, a historically low rate of delayed discharge in East Renfrewshire. We're one of the best in Scotland because people can get into care homes. I don't know the circumstances right now, and you know, a lot of things do come down to the personal choice of families as well. But I don't want to, you know, I don't know enough about the cases that are waiting at the moment.
Thank you very much.
Respite care as well. Respite care.
Oh no, thank you very much, Councillor Cunningham.
I have your answer.
Oh, Stephen,
Sorry.
I think Councillor Cunningham has asked you about respite care.
Yeah, I don't know much about respite care myself, I'm afraid. I couldn't answer on what's happening in terms of availability of respite care.
Okay.
Well, I could find out if you want me to look at what the current circumstances are.
Okay.
Thank you. Graham, I know I see your hand up on the screen. Can I just ask a question just before you come in, and maybe you could answer that at the same point? There was one thing that I didn't really feel was covered in the report, and it's probably because Rhodes, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think Rhodes have raised an objection, but I know this, and again, this maybe goes back to what we were talking about with the appeals, and Councillor Miller will be aware of this as well. I've been contacted by residents again and again about Drumby Crescent and the fact that it is used as a, want of a better word, a little bit of a rat run for cars coming down to avoid the lights there, or if they're going to the health centre. And if you have a facility that's as large as this, there's obviously going to be an impact on those local residents. I was surprised that roads didn't mention this, because I would have thought that mitigation measures would have had to be put in place to help the local residents with this. If this, and I haven't opened it out to the committee yet, so I don't know, but if the application does get passed, is there a condition that we can build in that has to be looked at? Because I'm concerned about the local residents there, and the fact that this is just going to increase additional traffic. I would be asking the same question if it was a residential development. It is just with that extra development there. What are we doing to ensure that it doesn't become even worse for them?
Yeah,
I know you wanted to comment on the other issues as well, but is there any way you could build that in and be
our consultation, we did consult road service in the application, and they didn't object in principle to the development. I think because it's a residential development, the movements are spread out throughout the day, particularly with it being a sort of retirement complex. Movements are more spread out during the day than it would be for a mainstream residential development, where there's peaks at peak hours at start of the day and the end of the day. So they weren't objected to it in principle, and said that there wouldn't be a significant increase in vehicle traffic. I think they feel that the traffic control junction there at Eastwood Mains Road and Drumby Crescent would be adequate to deal with it. They have suggested, if you are minded to grant the application, they have suggested a couple of conditions about visibility displays at the junction and a footpath into the site up to the door of the buildings, but they haven't objected to the principle of development and believe that the roads can accommodate it. I like you, I would probably have expected more objections from the local residents, but there were 3 representations, and really sort of one was opposed, one was supporting, and one was asking questions. So there wasn't a strong level of objection to it from the local residents.
It's just something I'm aware of that's came up from local residents, because I know that they had a group. Well,
that certainly didn't come through really. I mean, there was one comment about that, but it didn't come through really strongly in the representations made on the application. What I was wanting just to come back on briefly, Provost Fletcher, you talked about the council having sold the site with the intention of it being developed, and that's absolutely right. The site is allocated for residential development in the local plan, and certainly the council and the planning service are not opposed in principle to residential development at the site. I think the issue here with regards to the noise is that what's proposed here are 3-storey flats, and the residential block has windows directly overlooking the railway line at 3-storey height, and the noise from the trains do travel the distance. I think it's felt that if it was a lower scale development, say 2 stories, and buildings orientated slightly differently so that windows are facing away from the railway line or at right angles to the railway line, then there may not be the need for the acoustic fencing to the height that it's provided here, that it's necessary here, and it's felt that sort of 4.4 metre high fencing really just is too high and would be unacceptable. So it's the design aspect of this proposal rather than the principle which was causing issue there.
Thank you, Graham. That's good to know. But I presume these same issues would apply if there was housing. I mean, my naive assumption was when we sold the land, we at some point would face a housing development, and no doubt with the usual objections as you always get from local residents. But I mean, the infrastructure's in there for the health centre, and I'm very sympathetic to people who live in Drumby, because they will get an element of on-street parking when the health service car park's full and all that type of thing. And no doubt some people driving into the health centre from the other end of Drumby rather than where the traffic lights are. But I don't think it's a rat run. I mean, you can't run through Drumby without getting caught with the lights when you come out at the other end. I mean, it was at the health centre for another reason this morning. So, I mean, you always get held up with the traffic lights there. So they're not getting bothered with on-street parking, I think, at the moment, because the health service car park's not full. But I do accept that's an issue. But I just think these are issues that would apply to any development that's in there. And I just think morally as a council, if we're marketing land and it's in the local development plan, then we should be clear that any of the objections we've got is purely just the layout of the sites. Because I would have assumed that you would have put flats in there. And most flats are about 3 stories, are they not? So, I mean, what's the difference between a care home and putting flats in? That's what I don't really quite understand that's causing the concern with noise.
I think the issue is that it is felt that if it's a mainstream residential development, it could be designed in such a way that it didn't need an acoustic barrier, which is quite the height of 4.4 metres, and that will have quite a big visual impact on the area. So there's certainly not an objection in principle to residential development that's allocated for that. But a mainstream residential development might allow more flexibility in terms of the design and the layouts of the building, so that such acoustic fencing wouldn't need to be at the height that it is proposed now.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, we're just trying to simplify it, because we're all going to have to make a decision in this. Is the main objection then of the way the care home is designed, rather than from the planner's point of view, the care home itself per se? And the objection from the HSCP, if I understand it correctly, is the impact of the cost of additional elderly people, rather than really the impact on other care homes. Or there's no objection to Glasgow folk coming in or whatever it happens to be. I just read that there's maybe a concern about the cost. Is that the 2 real issues that are concerning the council?
Mr. Reid, Stephen, you wishing to come in?
Hi, maybe not for me, but just to clarify, in terms of our unwillingness to support was, it's really about over provision, and that we don't want to see fragility. It's not maybe like another sector where a better development can replace another development. There are consequences for a very vulnerable sector of our population that we have responsibility for, and that if there's oversupply in the market, then that's going to lead to closures. This and future developments. If we just allow oversupply in the market, then that has consequences for vulnerable residents who are in care homes that are their home, that they're settled in. So that's our principal concern. And as part of that, we need to be certain that care home development is justified and needed and appropriate, because it has some direct costs for the HSCP. So it's both of those things.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Councillor Swift?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. I am still of the opinion that if we look at the numbers, there has been a drop-off of people accessing care homes. I mean, it would be common sense not to want to go near a care home until you break the link between COVID and mortality, which I think vaccination has done. So I'm still of the opinion that this is not going to provoke an oversupply of beds. Just, I don't think it will. And clearly, there are other people who have got who are going to gamble millions on that, frankly. So, I'm sure I'm not the only person in the virtual room who thinks that, and watchers perhaps as well. I don't know.
Thank you very much. I think, sorry, Councillor Cunningham.
Can we move to the vote here?
I'm just going to move. Councillor Cunningham, I thought it was really important, Mr. Reid, I think I didn't know that that was the level we were at pre-COVID. I think that was a really important figure to get. And I thought it was, from what I'm reading and what I've heard, it was a really strong consultation response from HSCP. I'm going to, well, I'll just move that we accept the recommendation to refuse if I have a seconder. Okay. Sharon, I do not have, unless I can see him, do not have a seconder. Can I move back to yourself?
And I move to grant, Chair.
Sharon, Councillor Cunningham's wishing to move to grant.
Councillor Cunningham's moving to grant the planning permission. Is there a seconder?
Councillor Miller.
Councillor Miller. And is that based on the reasons, against all the reasons for refusal in the report?
Yeah.
And is Graham, can I just check, Graham, is there any conditions that would be needed to be added to that?
Perhaps, I don't know about this.
Certainly, if the committee were minded to grant the applications, I do have a list of conditions that I would suggest be attached. I don't know whether you want to go through them first or after you've made a decision about the principle of the development.
Oh, we'll really hear what your conditions are right after the vote.
I think, Sharon, I do not have a seconder.
No.
So what Councillor Cunningham has moved then passes, I presume.
Okay, so it's Councillor Cunningham is moving to approve planning permission. That was seconded by Councillor Miller, and that's subject to the conditions which the planning officer is about to advise us of.
Thank you very much. Mr. Shankland, can I bring you in with the conditions?
Okay, yes. Sorry, I've got a list. There's about 10 conditions here. I would suggest, which would be sort of standard for sort of new development of this type. Firstly, I would suggest a legal agreement covering to ensure that the proposed extra care apartments are restricted to care use in Class 8 of the use class order and remain in perpetuity and occupied by persons aged over 55. That's as suggested by the Development Contributions Officer. Otherwise, if it wasn't restricted like that, the applicants would be due an affordable housing contribution. So it's suggested that the permission is granted subject to the legal agreement. Secondly, it's suggested that a site investigation and remediation plan has to be approved and implemented should any contamination be found at the site, because it's believed that the site has been built up and that there's a possibility of contaminants there because the land was used as a former sort of railway siding. It's suggested, thirdly, a plan submitted, approved and implemented of the landscaping proposals, including walls and fences, and the details of the acoustic fence should demonstrate that it doesn't exceed maximum noise levels, and the revised landscaping plan should take cognizance of the acoustic fence and the additional planting required to screen the back of the houses at Drumby Crescent, and should include proposals for the maintenance of the landscaping and the open spaces, including the hard standing and sustainable drainage areas. It suggested that a full tree survey, including a bat survey for hibernation routes, be submitted and approved. It suggested that a plan and schedule showing external finishing materials, including hard standings, be provided. It suggested that a plan be submitted, approved and implemented showing all the finished, existing and proposed finished ground levels. A plan be submitted showing all external lighting. That an air quality impact assessment be submitted, approved and implemented in accordance with the recommendations from Environmental Health Service. In terms of the roads service comments, a plan to be submitted, approved and implemented showing a direct pedestrian link to the care home from Drumby Crescent. that visibility displays be provided as per the road service consultation response. That sustainable urban drainage be provided and implemented as per submitted details. And lastly, the environmental health recommendations for hours of operation for construction at the site be implemented as per their consultation response. And lastly, Network Rail advised some advisory notes to be added about working in close proximity to the railway line, and it suggested that they be added to the consent as well. So, sorry, that's quite a long list, but that would be the sort of normal requirements for a development of this size.
Councillor Miller, you wishing to come in?
Yes, thank you, Graham. Can I also suggest, and I heard you saying about the roads, could I ask that a condition be inserted about the roads with consultation with the roads to try and mitigate any the way the traffic movements, to help traffic movements to avoid going up Drumby Crescent?
Graham, previously the roads department had spoken to residents there to try and look at ways of access through Drumby Crescent. I know that we've actually we've changed the sort of parking restrictions in that area specifically to try and address the on-street parking, which was a massive problem just outside the health centre. So, you know, that's now been passed to have double yellows there. But it is still, and I agree with Councillor Miller, it's still a concern that this might possibly cause issues for the residents there, because they have been in discussions with roads about it. And I think roads were going to look and see if there was a way to mitigate it. I just would very much like them, as Councillor Miller does, to look at this.
Certainly sorry, Councillor Cunningham.
Does that all come back to the committee then, rather than an individual making that decision?
The if the conditions are attached, then those would be sorted and signed out by the planning service. They wouldn't individually come back to the committee normally. With regards to the roads comments, at the health centre, the access point was designed to at least direct people by way of curving of the pavement and the curbstones, at least to direct people down to the traffic lights and make it more difficult to do a left turn out of the site and into Drumby Crescent. Certainly we could add a condition. Certainly we could add a condition that the details of that junction have to be designed and arranged with the approval of the road service, with the aim of minimising the traffic turning left out of the site into Drumby.
Yes, absolutely, because I know that that was the health centre and the way it was planned, but it wasn't working to that effect. I think that there was a meeting held where it was agreed that they would put further mitigation measures into place there. So yes, a condition along those lines would be great, but is Councillor Miller in agreement with that as well?
Well, that would be ideal. Let's face it, neither you nor I are experts in road design, but I'm suggesting that with consultation with the roads department, they can do something. I mean, what Graham has just suggested would probably be fairly ideal.
Yeah, thank you very much, Graham. Does anyone else wish to come in the conditions?
I would just say I would support the conditions being added, and I'm happy that there are additional condition for roads if it's required that helps local people. But we should remember, as I say, whatever goes in there is going to generate additional traffic. And my guess, I'm not an expert in this, but I would have thought a care home would generate less traffic than houses or flats. So, you know, we need to be reasonable about what we put in there. So I do accept there might be an issue for local residents, but I would have thought the development as approved today is probably the least intrusive for local people, rather than, you know, lots of flats or houses going into the site there. But if there's something we can do roads-wise to make it better and safer, then I would certainly encourage that to be included as well.
Thank you very much, Provost. And unless anyone's wishing to still come in, Mr. Shankland, I see your hand still up. Are you wishing to come in before we move on to the next? Thank you very much.
No,
Right,
no, carry on.
Thank you very much. Stephen, are you wishing to stay? We've got one more application. Whether you wish to leave the meeting at the moment. I'm just going to move
happy. I'm probably most appropriate to leave. So.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Can I move us on to the second application, which is 2021-0521 4 Wigton Avenue. It's in the papers from page 41 onwards. Graham, can I bring you in on this, please? Or is it John is coming in?
No, I'll come in on that briefly.
Thank you.
Yes, this is an application at 4 Wigton Avenue. It's for a rear extension and a front side extension. You'll recall, as we discussed earlier, there was a similar application came up to you in May, which was refused on the basis of the sort of front side extension coming within 1 metre of the side boundary. The application that we have before us now has taken that front side extension away 1 metre from the boundary to overcome the objections and reason for refusal from last time. There now aren't any objections to the application, so it's proposed to be granted planning permission. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can I open it out to the committee if anyone's wishing to come in on this application? Provost?
Yeah, just, I mean, I was content with the previous application, although I was outvoted, I think, on the day, which is fine, that's democracy. So I don't have any problem with this at all, but I just kind of make the point that I do have some concerns that, you know, if this is approved, we approve something and then the reporter approves something different, so we can rather lose control of development. But I don't think there's anything to really object to, and probably given that the applicant would appear to have addressed the main areas of concern, I suppose it might be slightly more expensive for them, but I would rather hope that if we pass this, they could almost withdraw the appeal for the other one.
Thank you very much. Councillor Swift?
It's kind of echoing. I put my hand up, I didn't see Councillor Fletcher, or Provost Fletcher's hand up. It's the same thing. I don't think I mean, I have no objections. I'm pleased to see a revised plan. I'm pleased to see that it meets the local planning's conditions, which it should have done the first time, frankly. But there you go.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cunningham, are you wishing to come in on this?
No, I'm blowing my nose.
Oh, thank you. Unless there's any other comments, I'll move that we accept the recommendation to give planning permission for this for 4 Wigton Avenue. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Swift. Unless anyone's otherwise minded. Thank you. Can I pass back to yourself, Sharon?
Yeah, so just to confirm that the planning permission is granted there, it was proposed there by Councillor Ireland and seconded by Councillor Swift.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much everyone for your time today.
Right.
We'll see you at the next meeting. Thank you very much.
Right, bye.
Thank you.